Welcome to Legal Views with your host, Attorney Sheila R. Stuart.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Daryl, for the opportunity to be here with you on C-Joy Network on this evening. We are so excited to be back. We are hoping that everyone is having a wonderful holiday during this time of the year and that you are safe. We want to just acknowledge Daryl Breath from Boston, Massachusetts, and Johnny Savage. We are broadcasting live on C-Joy Network and Live 365, Facebook, and YouTube. And thank you so much for being with us on today. On today, we have a very, very interesting matter. We also have a very exciting guest. I am going to share some information with you regarding our guest, and then we're going to get into the subject matter on today, which deals with the Michigan shooting, the Michigan high school shooting that just took place, as well as the growing crime rate that's taking place across the United States, more importantly, in the urban corridors. We have with us on today Attorney Leslie Howard. He hails all the way from Baltimore, Maryland. He is an outstanding attorney, a civil rights attorney, and advocate for all types of people that are suffering harm, marginalization. He is a fellow. He is a brilliant person. He has served as special assistant to the mayor of Baltimore, as well as the mayor of Detroit. He has served in many roles, raising millions and millions of dollars for community efforts. Welcome, Attorney Leslie Howard. How are you today?
Well, thank you so much for having me. It's nice to be with you, Sheila.
Well, thank you. We're going to talk about the school shootings on this evening, and we want our guests that will, chime in to give us your thoughts on what's taking place today. We had a very, very serious incident that took place in Michigan a few days ago. Very sad situation. We had a 15-year-old shooter. A 15-year-old shooter that walked into his high school. He unloaded approximately 30 rounds, and which resulted in four students being murdered. 4 students being murdered and several shot and injured. And they're hospitalized. Some of them had surgery, and where our prayers go out to those families. Our prayers go out to those that are suffering at this time from that community. Amen. And we want to look at this whole issue of violence that's taking place across the U.S. And you can see that violence, it's moving into the suburban areas. It's spreading like a cancer. It's an epidemic. And we have to look at these real hardcore issues and decide what can we do as residents, as citizens, to make a difference. In the United States alone, this year, as of November the 30th, there has been 12 mass shootings, okay? There have been 6 mass shootings in the U.S. so far this year. 6 mass shootings. And we're talking about mass shootings that have taken place in schools. We're not talking about some of the other places, but we've had at least 6 mass shootings. And so what can we do to resolve some of these issues? Now, let's talk about the facts that led up to this particular shooting. We have the parents are now in custody. They were first, they were allegedly on the run. Their attorney stated that they're not on the run. They're going to turn themselves in. They're just out here, being safe and making sure that they're not harmed. But the parents were found in Detroit, Michigan, hiding in a warehouse, or allegedly hiding. Some are saying hiding, and they're saying that they were keeping themselves safe. They are being charged with the parents. They are being charged with involuntary manslaughter, okay? The son, the shooter, I don't want to say his name. Be careful about glorifying some of these things. The shooter, we refer to him as the shooter is being charged with 4 counts of first-degree murder and terrorism. And he is being charged as an adult. He's not being charged as a juvenile. He is being charged as an adult. What are your thoughts? Just to get started, what are your thoughts about this case, Attorney Howard?
Well, unfortunately, it's another instance of school mass shooting that has shocked the conscience of the nation, and it caused every parent's heart to break for the loss of life of these young people who parents will never see them grow up and blossom into the wonderful adults that they potentially could have been. So, as a parent and as an attorney, I am just appalled by the level of violence and how these school shootings are allowed to continue to happen without uh, any new legislation, particularly on the federal level, to provide for stronger gun regulation, and particularly to prevent guns from getting into the hands of younger and younger individuals.
Okay, interesting. Now, this particular case is very alarming. The prosecutor has laid out, has done a wonderful job laying this case out. And one of the things she talked about were the egregious level of information that was presented to the parents and how the parents took no action to assist this student, to intervene, and to get the student the assistance that he needed. Number one, they purchased this handgun for the student. The handgun was a Christmas present that they gave to the student, and gave to the shooter rather. And the shooter was caught by a teacher looking online for ammunition for the weapon. And the mother allegedly texted her son and said, "Son, I'm not mad at you. Just be careful that you are not caught." Okay. Also, there was an incident where the teachers pulled this kid in and said that they wanted the parents to get some assistance for the student. They didn't do anything about that. Also, the gun was kept in the house in an unlocked, unsecured place that he had access to, and apparently took the gun and placed it in his backpack and then went off to school with the gun. So there was just mistake after mistake after mistake that the parents allowed in this particular case to take place that placed all of these innocent individuals at harm. What are your thoughts as it relates to the parents' egregious behavior in this incident, in this situation?
Well, typically parents in these school shootings are not charged. And so this is one of the few, if not maybe the first instance, where you have a prosecutor who was courageous enough to charge the parents as well as the shooter for being criminally liable for the death of these students. It's really rather unprecedented that the parents have actually been charged in this particular instance. But I think it is also appropriate that they were charged. When you look at the facts of the circumstances that led up to the shooting, as late as the morning of the shooting, the parents had the opportunity to remove their child from the school and refused to do so. And unfortunately, the school, rather than call the police at that point, they sent the child back to the classroom. And that's when the shooting took place. So I think that there was negligence and culpability on both the part of the school administration as well as the parents. imagine if this had been an African American youth, and he had been acting out this way. It's no question in most of our minds that he would have immediately been suspended or expelled from the school. So I think that there were a lot of miscues where the ball was dropped, and this certainly could have been prevented had not both the school and the parents been so lenient uh, in what turned out to be a very deadly circumstance.
Very deadly circumstance, and you can't take back the mistakes that you made. These were deadly mistakes. We want to thank Pastor Diane Daniels for tuning in, and thank you for your comments. You are absolutely right. This was an unprecedented charging of parents that were negligent, and they are being charged with involuntary manslaughter, and they are in custody. They are in custody, and all three of them are on suicide watch. The latest report showed that all three of them were in custody. I think they're all in the same jail, and they're on suicide watch. And you made a comment, excuse me, you made the comment that if this would have been a African American student, you think that the conduct would not have been allowed to go so far and that he would have been removed from school. Do you think that many of these shootings that have taken place with Caucasian students, do you think that the school environment allows more freedom and more advantages and overlooking behaviors that allow these students to advance in this type of conduct?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, the record speaks for itself. Most of these school mass shootings have been habitually perpetuated by Caucasian students. And I think it's part of their white privilege that allows them to oftentimes get away with these uh, types of egregious behaviors. Uh, their schools are very often better funded than inner city schools, but with all the problems that inner city schools have, we don't have these types of mass shootings. Even though there might be a lot of violence around the schools, and people being murdered. I'm not trying to say that there's not violence in the black community, but as a part of the culture in our community, mass shootings is not an endemic part of the black community's culture.
I would agree with that. You tend not to see the mass shootings in communities of brown and black schools, but you do have problems within those communities, and we're going to address some of those problems that many these communities often see. Um, the charges of involuntary manslaughter that are being brought against the parents, how likely, in your opinion, do you think these charges are likely to result in a conviction? Do you think these parents, this is as Pastor Diane stated, this is unprecedented. Do you think these parents will actually get convicted and serve time for the role that they played in these children, in these students, these innocent students being murdered?
Well, I'd never like to second guess a jury, and we all have a constitutional right to be presumed innocent until we are found guilty by a jury of our peers. So I won't pronounce what the verdict should be in advance uh, of the trial. But what I will say is that when you look at the facts that led up to the shooting, I think that there's preponderance of the evidence where the parents are culpable. Um, as you mentioned, they bought the gun um, as a Christmas present for a minor, which is illegal. So if for no other reason than they empowered him to be able to carry out this shooting by purchasing the gun for him, and then making it easy and readily available by him by not storing it in a lockbox, which is typically required um, when you have a weapon in the home just prevent uh, this type of thing where somebody just can't take it, but you actually have to have a combination in order to get into the box, and it's much more secure, and you're not supposed to keep the bullets and the gun in the same location. So a lot of precautions that could have been taken in the home. I never heard anything about any kind of firearms training that was made available so that the young person uh, was actually educated before the firearm was even purchased for him. So I think the parents dropped the ball in a lot of ways. Even those who are gun advocates and believe in the right to bear arms, I think are outraged by the negligence that was exhibited by the parents in this particular instance.
Well, allegedly, the mother and the son spent some time together practicing using the firearm. So I guess the training that he received was from his mother. They went out back and they did some shooting together, and she termed it as quality mother and son time together, practicing how to use this weapon that he received from high school that he received for a Christmas present. And so everything, in my opinion, my legal opinion, that was done as it relates to purchasing the weapon and then giving the shooter the freedom to carry the weapon, use the weapon, and not to get any type of intervention, mental health services for him after the teachers were alarmed by some of the pictures that he was drawing and his online search for ammunition. I think that this is, as I stated previously, an egregious injustice that these parents allowed upon society and these innocent students at this school in Michigan. And these parents in this community, they're going to be torn apart for a long time to come. Now, let's go back in time for a little bit and just talk about Columbine. You know, Columbine, the attack on Columbine in 1999. And one of the things that they shared about the Columbine attack, that many of the signs were missed in terms of the shooters. They missed all of the signs. They missed all of the information that was out there. Since that time of the Columbine shooting, we have many kids that before they go on this rampage shooting attack, they have these horrible Facebook postings or Instagram postings that's not looked at, or the school is not made aware. And many times these kids are posting information online. They're doing these manifestos, and they're speaking in terms of how angry they are, that they want to commit certain acts. They have pictures of themselves with weapons, and they go on and on until that dreadful day occur when they actually go out and commit the heinous act, which results in the loss of life. How do you think we can use social media, Instagram accounts and Facebook accounts, etc., to try to intervene and take serious some of these posts that young people are using? How do you think we can use social media to help make kids safe?
Well, I think it all stems from the culture that we create in terms of the environment that young people grow up in. When we want to blame the children, but the parents have to accept some of the responsibility as well for what kind of environment, what kind of a culture are you allowing to permeate the place where your children are growing up in. Um, it, we can't just also dismiss the lack of morality that this crime represents. I mean, where's the God in all of this? Because God-fearing people don't go around murdering one another. So while there's a separation of church and state in the school, one has to question, like what kind of morality was this child being taught in the home, and uh, what kind of relationship did he have, say, like with a religious organization, a church, or something of that nature. I know I work with young people, and unfortunately, many of them are disaffected from spiritual development and don't have a personal relationship with God. And this lack of morality is really our first defense against this type of behavior, because the First Amendment is "Thou shalt not kill," and as we can see, people have essentially thrown this commandment behind their back, and we're plagued with murder on a mass basis practically every day in this country, and it's because of the availability of so many guns that are allowed to proliferate, particularly in our urban communities.
I think that's an excellent response that we have. We have society has allowed the removal of God, and we don't fear God, and it's almost taboo to speak of God. It's almost taboo to honor God and to bring God into discussions such as this. And you're absolutely right. I think when a country begins to turn their back on God and began to accept such such things as killing and murder, and it's like so many people are becoming desensitized to this whole thing of murder and mass shootings and inner city killings, that it's, that's them and that's not us. We live here and they live there. And it's like many people are very desensitized today. And I do believe, I wholeheartedly agree with you, that we need to put God back in the midst of what we do, and put God back in the midst of how we treat one another, and to teach our young people some of the moral attributes that they need to have: love, kindness, respect, dignity. And that if there is a conflict, that the way that you resolve that conflict is not with a gun, or a semi-automatic weapon, or semi-automatic handgun. And I think that is how many of our young people, not all of them, we got a lot of good kids out there, but many of them resolve conflicts in this matter. What solutions would you recommend for schools and communities that are dealing with these types of conflicts, in terms of escalations and de-escalations, and intervention, to help kids get back on track? Because one of the things that I am seeing, and I'm not speaking as a therapist or a psychologist or anything like that, I'm just speaking in my opinion, is that many of the social media outlets are causing bullying, separation of kids in one group that look a particular way, dress a particular way, have nicer things than this group, and it's magnified on social media. Because you can just put the pictures out there that you were at this party, you were with this group, and you didn't get invited, you didn't know about it. And so many of these kids today, and killing and shooting is not being accepted for how you respond to this, obviously. But many kids today, they're depressed, and without making an excuse for any of them, obviously, because that's not the answer, to get a gun and shoot people because you're not popular. But what do you think we can do to offer them solutions for de-escalation and intervention when they're having these types of problems?
Well, again, you have to provide children with counseling, both, I believe, spiritual counseling, uh, character development, um, uh, ethics. These types of virtues have to be taught. I mean, they don't occur automatically, and if you want a better society, then you have to create better people, and so you have to teach them better values. And too oftentimes we leave our children to the streets to educate and to teach them their culture. And so, parents have to take tighter hold on their children and keep them safe. Um, Provide for the type of moral instruction that you want the child to have in order to grow into a decent, wholesome person. The scripture says, teach a child in the manner in which you want them to grow. And, that's how they develop. I'm not saying that every child is going to be perfect, but we're failing our children as a society right now. In terms of how we fund childhood poverty is greater than 50% in the United States, and we're one of the richest countries in the world, but we don't even take care of the basic necessities for children. And, right now there's a big debate in the Supreme Court about a woman's right to choose to bear a child. But yet when the child is born in this country, we don't provide the kind of resources and support uh, that a single mother would need in order to raise her children. So, we talk a good game on the one hand about, we might be pro-life, but we're really just pro-birth, and we don't really consider the well-being of the child from the time that they're born to the time that they become an adult. We put so many obstacles and barriers before children. It's a wonder that we had decent young people in the first place, particularly in the disadvantaged community that I live in.
Wow, that's interesting. Well, and coming from that perspective of analysis, do you think that possibly maybe this person mentally ill or a mental defect defense is reasonable for the shooter, and that maybe there were some mental defects or diseases or problems that were caused in the home, that he did not get the help that he needed, which resulted in this tragedy, whereas he may need not to be penalized criminally for 4 counts of murder and acts of terrorism causing death? What do you think on that? Do you think this is a case possible leniency because of a mental disease or defect?
Well, again, I don't want to, predict what a jury might say, um, but obviously, I believe that anybody who kills someone is either is suffering from some kind of a mental illness. If it's not temporary, maybe it might be a permanent defect. But
Mm-hmm.
you have to um, basically lose a part of your own humanity to take somebody else's life. So, in this particular case, this young man took 4 people's lives and injured 7 more. Um, and I don't care if he was being bullied or if he was depressed or just exactly what psychological or mental health issue he was, going through. Um, Getting a gun and shooting people is not the prescription, to the solution for your mental health issue. He broke the law. So I think there has to be accountability here as well. And I think that he's been rightly charged, and I think the parents have been rightly charged in this particular instance.
Okay.
And
Okay.
whether or not mental illness um, will come into consideration, um, there is the instance of white privilege, and we just saw that in the Kyle Rittenhouse case, where it seems that the criminal justice system can bend over backwards for juvenile white defendants, but have a different standard of justice for juvenile defendants of color.
Well, what about all of the evidence that in the Rittenhouse case? That's very interesting. What about all of the evidence that showed he was acting in self-defense? Do you think the fact that he was acting in self-defense afforded him the right to be not to receive a conviction?
I think the Rittenhouse case was wrongly decided. I mean, you can see the bias from the judge from the very beginning when he decided that the prosecution couldn't call the people that were murdered victims, but he did allow the defense to refer to them as rioters and looters, and those people had not been convicted of rioting or looting. So it just seemed to me that from the outset of the Rittenhouse trial that the judge was biased in the favor of Kyle Rittenhouse and that he was going to get off despite what the evidence suggested. You can't create a situation of violence, and then when violence comes to you and then claim self-defense. He crossed state lines with an AR-15, and he had no interest in that instance. He put himself in that situation, and then he shot two people and wounded a third, and then tried to claim that's not self-defense.
So if I assert myself in a situation that I have no connection to, I assert myself into, I have a gun and there's a riot or a protest somewhere, and I'm not very fond of the protest. So I go to the protest, and I go to the protest armed. Okay. I don't necessarily have the intention to go to the protest armed to kill anyone, but I'm going armed to protect myself or maybe to protect a business. So once I get there, even though I assert myself in the midst of this protest, if I am then thereafter attacked several times, would I have the right to legally defend myself, even if it resulted in the loss of life?
Again, I thought that the case was wrongly decided. There were at least 5 legal instances where Kyle Rittenhouse violated the legal standards for self-defense. And I didn't think that self-defense was really a defense that he could use. First of all, when the judge threw out the charge that allowed him to bring the weapon across state lines as a minor, again, that if no other charge, that would have been the minimum charge that he could have been convicted on. And the judge threw out that charge and didn't even let that charge stand. So again, it just showed you the bias that the judge displayed on Kyle Rittenhouse's behalf. He wasn't going to let him get convicted of anything. And that's exactly what happened. But somebody tell me where the parents of those 2 young people who were murdered, where they're supposed to go to get their justice, and the man who was injured, being shot with a high-powered rifle at close range that almost shattered his whole arm. Where's the justice for these individuals? I hope that they bring a wrongful death lawsuit against the family civilly, because again, this was another parent irresponsibly buying a high-powered weapon for a child who was a minor, and then giving them permission to cross state lines with that weapon. What did they expect that would happen? You know, he wasn't just taking it there as a toy. He was going to take it there with the intent to use it.
Well, I thought that the weapon was at someone else's house and that he actually did not cross state lines with the weapon. That once he got across state lines, he went to a friend's house or whatever who was holding the gun, and then he retrieved the gun and then went to the protest. Now, I do agree.
He was supposed to have that gun. He's a minor. It was illegal for him to possess the gun in the first place.
Oh, absolutely, absolutely. I don't agree with. I'm just want to make sure we get all of the facts and the information out there. And I do think the judge was biased. One of the things that I want to highlight about the self-defense the self-defense argument that seems to be taken off across the U.S. is this whole issue of creating a disturbance or creating intimidation or altercations, and then using the self-defense to harm another person. I think that's the concern that I have with the way that self-defense is being utilized in the terms of individuals today. Now, in the Rittenhouse case, there was some incidents where he was attacked, he was seen on footage running and so forth. But I do have to agree with the fact, from my point of view, that the judge was biased. I thought the behavior of the judge was beyond reasonable. I was very shocked to see such a seasoned judge, act like that in a courtroom. And I'm sure it stunned the prosecutors when they had to come up against that. And when you have to come up against judges that conduct themselves in that format, you have to just try to keep your case moving forward the best that you can. And they had a steep hill to climb once the judge started carrying on and throwing out the charges for the young man. Do you think
when his phone, the judge's cell phone went off, and the music that came up on the ringtone was the same ringtone that Donald Trump uses at his rallies, from I think it was country singer Keith Greenwood. So people were saying that it was pretty obvious that the judge's political views were more aligned with white supremacist types of point of view than it would have been with Black Lives Matter protesters. And so that's the reason why he gave the prosecution such a hard time, but was so lenient with the defense.
Well, do you think a ringtone can be used to parallel people with a white supremacist mentality?
Well,
I don't think that's enough evidence for me.
No, it's not evidence. What people were saying was that it was a further indication of bias on the part of the judge, because his ringtone suggested that he had a right-wing conservative perspective, because he used the same theme song that Donald Trump uses at his rallies to spur up his followers.
Interesting, but
again,
I just
it's part of the cult. It was part of the same culture.
Okay, but I think we can't allow our justice to ride on ringtones and things like that.
Not at all.
I think we have to be more intuitive, or use more of a legal approach when it comes to those kind of incidents. So what do you do when you see a judge like that? I mean, what would the solutions have been for a prosecutor? And do you write a writ, or do you try to get the judge off the bench, or what? I mean, what do you do? So I think to me,
that's the solution. Is that, again, like the voters should vote that judge off the bench. He's been on the bench for I believe over 50 years, and I know here in Maryland, judges are required to retire at 70. I believe this judge is 73 or 75, and with his behavior, some people called it quirky. I would say that it really was even more egregious than that, and he really should not be on the bench anymore, in my opinion.
Right. And no, in Missouri, it's the same. You have circuit judges; they have to retire by the age of 70, and so there are some issues there that I have. But what I want is to try to look at tangible solutions, that when we see things, and in our analysis, we see it as bias, we see it as detrimental to an outcome of a case, we see it as detrimental to our clients, and we see it as maybe racially biased. What are some of the solutions that people can use to overcome those situations? And one of the things that we talked about was voting on judges, voting on the type of policies that they have, and voting on their analysis of cases and getting involved. So before a serious case gets before a judge, we already start having the right judges in place. And I think many times, a lot of people, they don't even know who the judges are when they come up for re-election. They don't know their record. They don't know their history.
Exactly.
And they just mark the ballots, or they don't vote at all. And I think that's what I was trying to get to, is that develop a plan when we see that, versus just kind of saying this person is biased or this person is aligned themselves with right wing. What have been their record in terms of how they've treated individuals before them, and do we vote them back in, regardless of what state that we may live in? But that's an interesting.
Voter education is definitely key in order to hold elected officials accountable. Circuit court judges have to run for election, and they're typically, given extensive terms, sometimes 10, 15 years. So voters, have to educate themselves on the records of judges, just like they would do their city council person or their state legislature, because these people do make decisions that can impact your lives. And as we can see, this particular judge probably should have been retired quite some time ago.
Okay, very good. Attorney Howard, tell people how they can reach you in Baltimore, Maryland. You're listening to Legal Views with Attorney Stuart, and we have with us today Attorney Leslie Howard, an outstanding civil rights attorney located in Baltimore, Maryland. Can you share with individuals how they can get in contact with you and give them your office information?
Yeah, the best way to get in touch with us is to contact us through our website, which is www.lesliecarlhowardesquire.com, and that'll take you directly to our website. It has all the information on how to get in touch with us. You can leave messages for us so that we can follow up on a case that you might have. You want to refer us to us. So again, that would probably be the best way to get in touch with us, is through our website, www.lesliecarlhowardesquire.com.
Okay, thank you very much. Now let's get back. We have a few minutes left. Let's wrap this up and speak in terms of the crime and the crime rate and the shooting rates in urban areas, as well as what's taking place in school. Now we have many people right now. Again, they're talking about the shooting in Michigan, the shooter, the parents, and all of these horrible things that have taken place during the holiday season. Is just a nightmare. However, we have a rising crime rate that it appears to be people are desensitized to. Chicago, St. Louis, Baltimore, Los Angeles, Detroit, Michigan. That's a real big one there. Camden, New Jersey. What can we do to get people more involved in recognizing all of this, the rising crime rate and the severity of crime in these urban corridors? What are your thoughts on this?
Well, most crime I see in my community here in Baltimore is really driven by poverty. And so I oftentimes say that nothing beats a good criminal career like a good paying job. So I see a lot of young men in my community who are unskilled and untrained, may not have a high school education, but they are strong, able-bodied, and they can work. And so I think we need to create work development programs for inner city youth where we train them with the skills that will lead to good paying jobs. Right now, there's a shortage of CDL truck drivers across the country that's creating this backlog in the supply train. Why not teach inner city youth how to become CDL truck drivers to help to alleviate this backlog? We need to make community college free and available so these young people can get a head start in life. But you can't burden young people with student loan debt and then expect for them to go out and be able to buy a house, a car, and start a family. I think that Congress is considering legislation to do just that right now, and they should pass that legislation to give our young people a break and give them an opportunity to be able to start a family and to not be burdened with student debt. Um, and again, I go back to the lack of morality and a lack of God conscience in the community. You know, you have to dehumanize a person before you can murder them. There's what I call a post-traumatic slave syndrome that's been talked about by a lot of black social psychologists that allows us to dehumanize one another when we refer to each other as the N-word, and it's popularized in the hip hop music and culture that our young people listen to, and all of this drug and violence is allowed to perpetuate itself in our community without a counterbalance to spiritual morality that would lead us to good behavior. And so we want good, we got to work for good. And parents need to get involved in this in the schools, volunteer their time on the PTO and these other parent teacher organizations, and create the kind of culture in their neighborhoods and in the children's schools that they want to see their children emulate. It doesn't happen by accident. You have to be intentional about creating culture, and it's only our culture that has saved us in the past and will save us in the future. Our ancestors had less education, less money, but they built so many great institutions through the church that saved us. Mutual aid societies, insurance companies. Most of the historical black colleges and universities were started through our churches. So we have to get connected again spiritually because there's always been God who's been on our side. And if we think that somebody else is going to save us but us, we are sadly mistaken.
So how do we get the community, or how do we get urban areas to buy into this? Because crime pays for some people, okay?
Oh,
Crime
yeah.
pays.
It's
And what we're seeing
it's,
now, there's a mass exodus from employment. People aren't going back to work. And so after COVID, and I don't know if it was the unemployment or what happened, but people cannot, employers and companies cannot fill jobs like they did pre-COVID. Many jobs have many restaurants and different types of organizations have closed down because they can't get people to come in, fill out an application, and go to work and stay on the job. And there's a new community of people that are learning how to live without employment, without having a day-to-day job. They're doing different things and they're not filling these jobs any longer. So, and what you're seeing is a rise in crime. So the jobs are there. What some are professional jobs and some are not the best jobs, but they're available, and many people will not take these jobs. So how do you reconcile this?
well, that's the problem. I mean, wages were depressed for so long. With minimum wage being $7.50 an hour. People needed three jobs just to make ends meet with those kind of low wages. Now, as a result of the pandemic, it showed the how valuable so-called essential workers really are, and now that people recognize their value, they're no longer willing to wait to work for those low wages. So you've had companies that rely upon essential workers having to raise their wages to at least $15 an hour just to attract uh, people to be interested in taking those jobs. And because of such a demand amongst so many companies for low skilled and unskilled workers now, um, they're actually competing with one another, trying to hire enough people. So it's a great opportunity for workers at this point in time. And you actually see workers united and actually creating labor unions once again, something that had fallen out of favor in the labor movement as well. Here in Maryland, the school bus workers began to organize into labor unions and demanding a better pay and better benefits from the school system. So it's an exciting time in the labor movement, and I'm curious to see how all of this is going to shake out eventually. But I think it's a good time for workers right now, and that they're being able to demand higher wages that will hopefully lead to a higher standard of living.
Okay, very good. Very good. I would hope so, because there are opportunities out there. And many, as you stated, many of these restaurants, fast food restaurants, are now paying $15 an hour. And I would hope that people will look at the options that they have of crime, imprisonment versus a good hard day work, 8 hour day job, a regular job, versus a life of crime that's eventually is going to lead to imprisonment. My last question that I thought about, I would like to ask you. We had this shooting at the high school and many other shootings. How do we reconcile this whole issue of the Second Amendment and gun control, in your opinion? Many people believe that it's a liberal versus conservative issue, and that when anyone began to talk about uh, gun control, it's an infringement upon the Second Amendment, my right to bear arms. But in many instances, what's being shared is, how do we keep people safe from having the opportunity of going out buying these dangerous weapons, oftentimes with no restrictions, and they can get these types of weapons and carry them and give them to kids, and it results in all of these types of heinous crimes. In your opinion, how do we balance this?
Well, we
I'm
need
sorry, go
we
ahead.
need gun control. I mean, plain and simple. United States has more guns, per capita than any other country in the world. You can't have you know like 10 guns for every person and expect that you're going to have um, a safe environment. I mean, guns don't keep you safe. If anything, if everybody's walking around with a gun, like the Wild Wild West, that's not going to make you more safe. That's going to make you less safe. And so, what we need is responsible gun ownership. Yes, the Second Amendment says that the right to bear arms of citizens should not be infringed upon, but that doesn't mean that we don't need sensible gun regulation. Why do people need an AR-15 or these semi-automatic weapons with overcapacity magazines? Maybe we should regulate the amount of bullets that people can have, um, and then maybe we would see the level of violence go down. I think it's Chris Rock said, if bullets were like say like $1,000 a piece, people would think twice about shooting somebody because it would cost a lot of money, and so um, I'm just joking, but my point being is that we need sensible gun regulation, and here in Maryland we have a ban on assault weapons, and you have to be licensed in order to have any kind of a gun, including a long gun, a rifle, in Maryland. But in Virginia and some of the surrounding states, their gun laws are not as stringent, and so a person can go into a neighboring state or to a gun show online and order a weapon now. And now they have what they call these ghost guns that don't even have serial numbers on them. And we have to have some kind of sensible gun regulation and reduce the number of guns in society overall, because it's not making us more safe. If anything, it's making us less safe.
Very good. Excellent. And as I agree with you, gun regulations on assault weapons is not the same thing as infringement on the Second Amendment. Having some type of accountability on who gets what, how they get it, and how it's being used is not an infringement on the Second Amendment. For example, a 15-year-old buying a semi-automatic and making sure that whoever purchased the semi-automatic is not going to give it to a 12-year-old, 15-year-old. Having some type of regulations that do not infringe upon your right, but it keeps society safe. Thank you so much, Attorney Howard, for being with us on this evening. You've done an outstanding job. I will hope that you will come back and share with us further in 2022. We will look forward to hosting you. Do not leave. And we are turning the mic back over to Daryl Brett with C-Joy Network. Thank you so much for tuning in, and we will see you soon. Thank you.
It's been my pleasure, Attorney Sheila.